Okay, so now we're going to hop over to Rocky Mountain National Park. This is actually at Lake Lily, which is right outside of Estes Park, which is, I believe it's in Rocky Mountain National Park, but it might be just outside of it. I can't quite remember. Either way, the light this morning was incredible. This was probably around like 8 a.m. after sunrise. The sun had risen, it was up in the sky, and it was just pouring through these fall colors. It was unreal. Um, I always try to explain to people when they ask, they see a photo like this and they're like, wow, is it really that yellow? And I say yes, because you have to explain it, because if we hop over to the raw file, this is the raw image straight out of camera. And you're like, or some people will say, like, okay, well, is that what it actually looked like? And the answer is no, because a raw file is just the raw stripped down data that the camera is capturing. It always ends up looking slightly more dull than it did in real life, and not even slightly, but quite a bit more dull, because it's just the camera trying to bring in as much light as possible, and then it puts it in raw form, and then you have to manipulate it to add contrast, saturation, vibrance, all this stuff, which is the same thing that the camera would be doing as if you shot in JPEG mode. When you shoot in JPEG, your camera is deciding how the image should look by adding contrast levels, saturation, sharpening, detail, all that stuff. So when you shoot in RAW, you're basically creating your own JPEG algorithm based on how you remember the scene looking. Okay, so this is the RAW file, and we'll just hop right in. There's not a whole lot we have to do with this one in Lightroom, but I picked this image to process because of the things that I did in Photoshop as well. So first thing we want to do is keep an eye on the histogram, and we're going to bring the exposure up a little bit, and then right away we'll hit it with a good amount of contrast. And already we're getting pretty close to where we need to be. There's not a whole lot more. So consider this though. If you were doubting what the color looked like in real life, this was the raw file, and I've only increased the exposure and the contrast. I haven't touched saturation. The light was coming from behind, and it was just pouring through these colors, through these fall leaves that were at their peak, and it was just glowing inside of there. It was amazing. So I won't even touch the vibrance and saturation on this, because I could bring this up and take it way too far just with contrast. Okay, so we'll get this to a slightly more believable level, I suppose, right there. And that's really all we're going to do inside of Lightroom. I'll click the remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections, but it's really not even doing anything on this one. And the reason why is because this was taken back in 2014, I believe. And I was using a Sony A7 camera, but you'll see here that it's not picking up a profile to use for my lens correction. And that's because I was using a Canon lens. So since you're using two seemingly incompatible devices, a Sony camera and a Canon lens, it's not going to automatically pick up that. So I'd have to go in here to enable profile corrections, go to make Canon, and this is going off of the lens, okay, not the camera body. Model, it was a 100 millimeter f2.8 IS. There we go. And there we go. So now we can toggle this on and off. And you can see that it's making a slight change, getting rid of some vignetting. And yeah, I'll leave that there. Okay. So now we're ready to hop over into Photoshop. So we'll right click the image, edit in Photoshop, and I'll see you over there. Okay, we don't have a ton to do in Photoshop, but there were a couple of little tricky things that I wanted to show you guys here, and that's why I chose this image. So the main things we want to do here is there's a very slight yellow color cast to these tree trunks, and that's because the inside of this forest was just glowing yellow. So it's easy to see why. What I want to do is I want to take that down a little bit, but if I just take the yellow channel down in the image, it's going to affect the entire image, and I don't want that. So we need to come up with a good selection. It is just isolating these tree trunks and nothing else. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but I'm going to show you the kind of the most accurate way, which is luminosity masks. And then we're going to use that same mask to sharpen the tree later. Okay, so let's hop over to our channels. And then, let's see, let's get rid of this. And then we're going to go to our channels and see which one isolates those trees the best. And if you look here, I'm going to think that the blue channel is going to probably be our best bet. So just like the other videos that you've watched already, we're going to command click the blue channel, go down and create a new mask from that selection. Command or Control D to deselect it. And then with the alpha 1 channel selected, we're going to hit Command or Control L to bring up our levels adjustment layer. And then I'll just bring those blacks all the way down. Get it really good. And then bring our whites way up. Okay. So something like that, I think will be good. Okay, now you see all these little spots here in the trees. We can get rid of those a few different ways, but the easiest is probably just to create a hard brush like that, paint with black, paint with black, there we go. And we'll just paint them out like so. You don't have to get right up to the tree, but if you can get pretty close, you'll be doing better. Okay, and just paint through. Like that. Okay, there we go. Now this side. All right. And I'll just leave that in there because we're not going to make a huge adjustment here. So we're just going to bring the yellows down a little bit. Okay, now that we have our mask created, I'm going to load it up again by command clicking it so that we can use it as a mask. We're going to hop back over to our layers and then choose hue saturation. Sorry, I did that in the wrong order. So I need to go back over here. Just load it up, layers, and then hue saturation. There we go. Now we have our mask, which is the luminosity mask, loaded up on our hue saturation adjustment layer. From here, we'll just grab the sample tool, come over to the tree trunk, and you'll see that yellows have popped up. And then we're just going to drag those back. Now you can see if I go all the way back or all the way forward, the only thing that's really being affected is the tree trunks, which is what we wanted. So this is at 0. And then we're just going to pull it back a little bit to make those tree trunks look nice and white. And then if we wanted to, we could further play with the mask and draw through with white onto it to remove all the yellow from the black parts too. Like that. The mask didn't pick up. Okay. This is just optional, but you know, it's there if you want it. All right. There we go. And then we'll just take the opacity slider and kind of toggle it back to where we want it. So I think probably in the 60 to 70 range is pretty good for this. And then the only other thing we really need to do is sharpen the image. So Shift Option Command E, Filter, Other, and High Pass. We'll do 3 pixels. Set our blend mode to soft light. We'll do this one a little bit more subtle. And then I'm going to throw a black mask over. And then the only thing I want to sharpen here is the tree trunk. So I'll just manually paint it in here. Just like that. All right, if we go into 100% and then turn this on and off, you can see the change that it's making. All right, guys, that's it. This is probably the most simple image of all of them, but I wanted to show you how another way that you can use these luminosity masks to remove color from specific parts of the photo. And if this image wasn't so busy with all the leaves and twigs and you know the difference between the white and the black on the tree stumps of the aspens, that mask would be a lot easier to create. But this was kind of a complicated situation where you really have to go in and do some manual work to the mask as well. So most situations aren't that complicated, but hope this has helped you guys, give you some more ideas of how you can use those masks to really zone in on specific parts of the photos. All right, see ya.